Imagine for a moment, what is the secret to unlocking your brain's full potential? Boosting your emotional intelligence, even tackling huge educational challenges. What if it wasn't some, futuristic neuro gadget or a complex drug? What if it was something ancient, really accessible, and, well, as profound as poetry? Today, we're taking a deep dive into Clint Miller's really groundbreaking work. It's called The Biohacker's Guide to Poetry, Brain-Boosting Techniques Inspired by Charles Darwin's Forgotten Theory of the Power of Verse. Our mission, to uncover how this often overlooked art form can actually be a genuine biohack for your cognitive and emotional self. We'll explore the implications, especially for, say, education, personal development, and basically give you a shortcut to being really well informed on this fascinating mix of neuroscience, literature, and even surprisingly, Darwin's ideas.
Yeah, and what's really powerful in Miller's work, I think, is his central argument. He's saying poetry isn't just, some niched artistic thing. He presents it as this remarkably low-cost, super accessible tool, one that he believes has this unique ability to fundamentally reshape education and our individual mental lives. The core idea is that poetry, specific kinds of poetry, can uniquely stimulate the entire brain for really profound, lasting benefits. That's a big shift from how we usually think about it.
Okay, stimulate the entire brain. That makes me think, though, don't most things we do, like reading an email or, solving a puzzle, engage the whole brain somehow? What makes poetry stimulation so different, according to Miller?
That's a great question, and it's really key to what Miller's getting at. He explains that poetic techniques, especially the deliberate use of rhythm and rhyme, they uniquely achieve what he calls dual hemisphere brain stimulation. So think of your brain, you've got the two halves, right? The left hemisphere, generally handling verbal stuff, math, logic, analysis. And then the right hemisphere, more tuned into nonverbal things, music, creativity, intuition, emotion. Now, while lots of activities use bits of both, poetry, especially rhythmic, rhyming poetry actively engages both sides at the same time. And that's something few other activities really do in quite the same way.
Okay, so it's not just passive use, it's like actively working out both sides together.
Yeah.
Almost like a full-body brain workout instead of just hitting, say, the logic muscle.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. Miller points out that standard prose, reading, novels, articles, even dense science papers, that tends to push us into a consciousness really dominated by left brain processing. We're analyzing, decoding, following logical steps. And our academic systems, pretty much globally, seem to almost, accidentally push this left brain dominance. He uses this powerful image. Think of talented students, maybe from China or India, spending hours in classes heavy on math and science. They're essentially bulking up only the left side of their mental body, often leaving the right side less developed.
Wow, that is a striking picture. A bit worrying, actually,
Right.
like a bodybuilder who only worked one arm. And, I can't help but think about our own schools here in America with the focus on standardized tests.
Oh, absolutely comparable. The American system is also highly left brain focused. Miller mentions tests like the SATs. You've got math and verbal sections. Now, students might be better at one than the other, but here's the thing. Both math and verbal skills primarily tap into the left brain. So even if you think of yourself as a verbal person and struggle with math, you're still mainly exercising that same hemisphere. This reinforces the imbalance, leading to what he calls, quite provocatively, off-balanced mental lives, where, significant potential on one side just isn't fully developed.
And it's not just the tests, right? Schools often find it hard to offer really strong, consistently funded programs for the right brain. Things like music, art, dance, maybe even some forms of meditation. They often get sidelined as not serious as subjects, or the funding just isn't there for everyone.
Exactly, that's the big challenge. But then, what if? What if there was an activity you could easily, cheaply weave into existing subjects? Something that could encourage this full brain development without needing massive new programs or budgets? Miller argues that poetry, specifically rhythmic and rhyming verse, is that solution. Low cost, high accessibility. A full brain workout, he thinks, could fundamentally change education worldwide. But, he notes, it's massively underused right now, especially in its most powerful forms.
Okay, this is fascinating, and it connects to something in his book titled Charles Darwin's Forgotten Theory about Verse. How does Miller link the father of evolution to, the power of poetry?
Right, and this is where it gets really captivating. Miller looks at Darwin's less famous observations. Darwin actually speculated, back in The Descent of Man, that early human language probably didn't start as just plain prose. He thought it likely began with musical and, yes, poetic elements. Darwin believed our ancestors, driven by emotion, used rhythmic, melodic sounds, sort of proto-poetry for things like courtship, communication, building group bonds. He argued that the sheer pleasure we get from rhythm and rhyme was crucial in developing our brains, shaping abstract thought, fostering social cohesion, maybe even cultivating our moral sense. Basically, Darwin saw poetry not just as art, but as a fundamental driver of human brain evolution and social development, almost a biological need.
So not just a cultural add-on, but like a core evolutionary tool that helped make us human. They're saying we've kind of forgotten this.
Pretty much, yeah. Miller argues that by ignoring Darwin's perspective, we've really undervalued poetry's deep biological and social roles. We tend to treat it like an elective, something nice but optional, instead of seeing its power as a tool for cognitive and emotional growth that's, well, hardwired into us. He suggests that what neuroscience is starting to show us now, Darwin actually intuited over a century ago.
That's incredible. And it sounds like this isn't even a brand new idea, even post-Darwin. There were researchers pointing this out more recently, too, weren't there? Decades ago.
Yes, absolutely. Miller brings up some really compelling research from the 1980s. Scientists named Turner and Pupple, they studied poetic meter and brain effects extensively, and their findings were pretty stark. They basically said that early and continuous exposure to the best metered verse is essential for developing young minds fully. They believed it fosters higher human values, critical thinking skills like seeing patterns, generalization, cultivates positive emotions, and even refines our internal sense of time.
Okay, so if scientists knew this stuff back in the 80s, why isn't metered poetry like a mandatory part of school everywhere? What stopped us from using something seemingly so beneficial?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, and maybe a little unsettling. Turner and Pupple actually warned about this. They suggested that the modern bureaucratic social system, which tends to value specialists over generalists, that this system might actually discourage techniques like metered verse. They even theorized there might be a kind of perverse incentive to remove these powerful elements from poetry in schools.
A perverse incentive. Wow, how so?
Well, think about it. If the system prioritizes specialized skills, and if poetry encourages a broader, more integrated way of thinking, a way that might challenge established ways of doing things, then maybe the system, maybe inadvertently, maybe subtly, pushes it aside. They felt that developing worldviews that might transcend the limited values of the system could even be seen as a sort of threat to the status quo in education. And they noted that even when poetry is taught, it's often free verse, which doesn't have the same dual hemisphere kick it, or it gets analyzed to death with purely left brain tools, missing the transformative experience entirely.
That's quite a thought. That a system might unintentionally sideline a tool for broader thinking, just to keep itself running smoothly with specialists. But okay, let's widen the view a bit. Beyond the individual brain benefits, Miller also talks about another angle, right? Poetry's ability to connect people, its social power.
Yes, and this connects directly to social cohesion, especially important now with such diverse societies. Miller cites researchers like 𝐬𝐨𝐫𝐞𝐿 and colleagues from the Max Planck Institute for Empirical Aesthetics. They write a lot about poetry's cross-cultural power. They point out, everyone gets that music brings people together, think concerts, anthems, but poetry, they argue, is often overlooked as this ancient, cross-cultural, and deeply emotional tool for connection. It has similar, maybe even deeper roots.
That makes sense. Music feels universal, instant. Poetry sometimes feels more individual, maybe academic. What do they think causes that difference in perception?
They think it mostly comes down to a lack of positive, enjoyable experiences with poetry early on. Not enough exposure in childhood, maybe too much dry analysis in school, and just a general unawareness of its potential for real pleasure and deep emotional connection. So their research really aims to put poetry back on the scientific map, you could say, and promote understanding of its effects, especially in education, particularly in today's globalized classrooms where bridging divides is so crucial.
So it's not just about wiring up one person's brain better, but also about potentially syncing up groups, fostering understanding. That sounds incredibly relevant for diverse classrooms today.
Exactly. Miller really emphasizes this. Rhythmic, rhyming poetry could be a major help for schools dealing with increasing diversity. It offers a kind of common ground that can work across language barriers. He mentions Natasha Elizabeth Beaumont's research from the University of Sydney. She showed how rhythm and rhyme really engaged students whose first language wasn't English. Her studies found that when students physically and emotionally engaged with the poetry, moving to it, feeling the rhythm, it immersed them socially and imaginatively. It helped them get past language hurdles, boosted comprehension, vocabulary, and even their sense of belonging.
That's huge for diverse learners, a way to connect beyond just, direct translation. And thinking bigger picture, Miller connects poetry to two major crises America is facing right now. That's pretty bold.
He does, and the links he draws are really insightful, I think. First, there's the reading crisis. Miller points out that in the early 2020s, American students hit real lows in reading ability. Scores stagnated, even dropped significantly. By 2024, it was even a viral topic on places like TikTok, just how widespread the lack of reading and writing skills had become. And this isn't just about school grades. Poor reading skills drastically lower the chances of graduating high school, affecting whole lives.
And the second crisis, mental health,
Oh,
which feels more acute than ever, doesn't it?
yeah.
Especially post-pandemic.
Absolutely. The COVID-19 pandemic really hit student mental health hard, which was already a growing problem. A CDC study during the pandemic found, I think it was something like 44% of high schoolers reported feeling persistently sad or hopeless. And classrooms are still seeing really alarming rates of depression, anxiety, even suicidal thoughts. These aren't small problems. They fundamentally disrupt learning and well-being.
Okay, so on the surface, those look like two huge separate issues: reading skills and mental health, things many of us worry about as parents or educators. But Miller, coming from his neuroscience and literature perspective, he suggests there's a deep connection and maybe a shared solution.
He does, and it's a really crucial link. Research consistently shows a strong correlation here. Kids who are better at managing their emotions, recognizing them, understanding them, dealing with them, they tend to become better readers over time. The connection happens through shared cognitive skills, like building vocabulary, identifying words, and especially working memory. And as we've been discussing, poetry, particularly the rhythmic rhyming kind, seems almost tailor-made to boost the brain's abilities in exactly those areas. It creates a kind of positive feedback loop.
So Miller's suggesting poetry could be a key part of tackling both the reading crisis and the mental health crisis. That's a really significant and honestly quite hopeful claim. And this loops back to ideas like empathy and neuroplasticity, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. Let's touch on empathy first. The term really gained steam in neuroscience around the 1960s with Paul MacLean. He defined it as basically identifying your feelings with someone else's. More recent research shows that when we empathize, our brain actually uses the same neural networks involved in experiencing our own emotions firsthand. Miller argues that literature in poetic form is uniquely good at activating these empathy pathways. Maybe because it's so experiential, immersive, and emotionally resonant. It lets you engage with ideas and perspectives in ways that just aren't possible in, say, a textbook.
That phrase you used, rehearsal of empathy,
Yeah.
in a safe space,
Yeah.
that really resonates, like practicing understanding others without the real-world consequences right away.
Precisely. And by boosting empathy, which we know promotes cooperation, better communication poetry can significantly improve learning environments and just social harmony overall. The evidence is pretty compelling, too. Miller cites studies, poetry interventions with hospitalized kids aged maybe 8 to 17. They showed significant jumps in happiness, creativity, self-reflection, and at the same time, remarkable decreases in fear, sadness, anxiety. And then for nursing students, a 10-session poetry program led to big, lasting increases in well-being and what's called ego resilience. Basically, your ability to cope and bounce back from adversity, plus noticeable drops in stress and anxiety.
So these benefits aren't just for kids in school. It really extends across ages and situations.
That's exactly right. Miller also mentions other studies showing poetry can help treat depression, anxiety, stress in adults too. And it can even boost memory and verbal fluency in older adults, helping counter some age-related cognitive decline. When you put all the research together, it really highlights this unique power of rhythmic, rhyming poetry. It improves the mind in so many ways, right across the lifespan. Miller confidently states these cognitive emotional boosts are pretty much unmatched by any other form of literature, art, or media, which makes it an incredibly potent, yet still mostly overlooked, tool for just human flourishing.
Wow. Okay, so we've taken this deep dive into Clint Miller's insights. We've seen how rhythmic, rhyming poetry isn't just, art for art's sake. It's potentially a powerful, accessible tool for developing both sides of the brain. Cognitively and emotionally, it might help with educational crises, boost empathy, make diverse classrooms work better, improve well-being for everyone. Kind of like Darwin might have guessed generations ago.
Yeah, and what's really striking is how practical Miller's suggestion is, tying back to Darwin's idea of its fundamental role. He suggests a remarkably simple daily habit for you, the listener. Just read one short poem each day. Most poems only take, 3 to 5 minutes? He argues this consistent exposure can really turbocharge your intellectual and emotional skills. It helps your brain train itself to recognize and anticipate those pleasing patterns of rhythm and rhyme. And that fosters new neuroplasticity, that amazing ability our brains have to reorganize and form new connections all through life.
So here's a provocative thought to leave you with. If just a few minutes of poetry daily, something often dismissed as, academic or niche Mike, if that can lead to profound neuroplasticity, enhance empathy, bridge divides, even tackle major societal crises, what other simple, overlooked practices might be the real biohacks hiding in plain sight? Just waiting to transform your mental life and unlock potentials you didn't even know you had.
We really encourage you to explore this idea. Maybe, pick up a poem yourself today or tomorrow. You might be genuinely surprised where that newfound neuroplasticity takes you, expanding and enriching your mental life in ways that other kinds of reading or media might not quite match. It's like reconnecting with a really ancient, really powerful part of being human.